Thrive Guys, episode 12, Lockdown Learnings. So last week, Dan, we had quite a lot of waffle at the start of our conversation together. We did say at the start it would be a short episode, and then it ended up running rather long. So I got one thing to share with you before we jump into the episode, and then I think you've got one thing to share with me.
Yes.
So I wanted to share with you that I apparently have a new wake-up time, which is not one of my choosing, but it's one that I have. It's not the one I want, but it's the one I apparently need. Yeah, just this whole last week, my alarm's set for 6:30, and my body's just decided, make it 5:30, and I've just literally woken up, bolt upright, awake as anything. I think it might be because the sun is coming up earlier, and my body is starting to shift to that new sort of paradigm, I guess, or circadian rhythm, I think they call it.
Or circadian.
Circadian, there you go. Circadian is something else. Circadian rhythm. As a result of that, I've been absolutely shattered this entire week. And so I'm very much looking forward to my week off next week. So, yeah. What's been going on with you? That's literally been the best thing, the most shareable thing this week.
And it's been the quickest thing, and I'm glad for it, because, as you mentioned, we waffled for maybe 30 minutes before we got into some real nitty-gritty content.
Exactly.
This week it's been hectic for me. I've had an influx of audio work. I've stuck to my standard waking up between 6 and half 6 every day. I completed 4 instrumentals, and I partnered with a singer who's wanting to use another maybe 5 to 10 of my songs.
Nice.
So they're in progress, and I finished 2 songs. One is actually confirmed in the charts, which is, decent. I don't know how it will go, but we'll see.
Does that mean it's in the charts, or it's going to be in the charts?
It's going to be. It's registered and stuff like that, but that was a new learning curve for me.
Nice. Well done. And well done for having your little nice wake-up time as well. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, actually, I've had no problems with sleep this week because of an app that I use.
Yeah, okay.
Called Aurora, where I just hit the same method every night. So whatever time I get into bed, it does a half hour of audio, which at the moment is just like some meditation music. And then after that half hour, I'm just knockout.
Brilliant.
It's really, really cool. So maybe, it's not going to help your wake-up time, but...
I fall asleep really, really quickly. I wake up once at 3 and then once at 5:30. Don't know why, but there we go.
The witching hour.
Yeah, pretty much. Hopefully one day I'll find out. Should we do Win of the Week?
Yes, please.
Win of the Week is our segment where we get to share something that's happened this week that we'd like to celebrate. Just to make sure we start our conversation on a positive note, even though I just started the conversation on a negative note. But there we go. So we post a reminder on our platforms every Friday. So if you'd like to share your win of the week with us, and we'd really like to hear your wins of the week, it's always good to finish a week on a high note. So please do share them with us. Tag us in your post on Twitter or Instagram. Our handle is at ThriveGuysPod, or tag it with hashtag win of the week. So my win of the week this week is a really nice and simple one. I am fully prepared for my week off next week. I have concluded all of the business that I needed to conclude before the week was out, and so there's no little hangers-on, no little hangovers that are going to impact my ability to completely shut off next week. So, and this is the first week that I've had off in absolutely months.
And you look like you're dressed as Holiday Joe at the moment. You're not wearing the same old blue jumper.
No, I'm not. I'm in my casual t-shirt now. I'm like a proper dad when he's off on holiday. I bring out the ugliest t-shirts when I'm not working. So there we go.
Can I please just elaborate on that, right? You are wearing a Dragon Ball Z t-shirt, which I love, and I have exactly the same one, but I'm just highlighting that for the viewers. That is rest and relaxation at its best.
Oh, absolutely. I'm 32, right? And so I am of an age where we grew up with Cartoon Network, and 5 p.m. every weekday on Cartoon Network, what was it? Toonami. That was it.
Yeah.
Toonami came on, and 5 p.m. was Dragon Ball Z, and they played basically up to the end of the Freezer saga on repeat, and it was one of the best things ever. So
simpler times.
Simpler times indeed. So Dan, what was your win of the week this week?
Mine is all centered around automation. I had a call from someone I work with, just asking to take a look at what I'd done automation wise, because they'd heard some murmurs around the business, because I've been doing a few favors for different people in terms of automating document creation. And he's decided that he wants to take it back to the wider team to see if it's something that we can adopt across multiple BUs and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
And it's quite interesting for me because it's quite easy for me to kind of disseminate that information because, as quote unquote Danbot has been configured, it's been documented with the data flow and the concept behind it, e.g. like the principles of how it should operate and stuff like that. So it basically works as my automated PA now for myself, and I don't know how it, I haven't really given it much thought in terms of how I can scale it up, but it's quite interesting and it's a learning curve. So I'm quite excited about that, but that's my win.
I really need to get deeper into automation. I really need to spend some time. Maybe that's one of the things that I do this next week is I take the opportunity to, from the ground up, look at, okay, what part of my process can I automate? This almost sounds like I'm doing work, right, where I'm not supposed to be, but this is just the way I'm wired. This is something that really excites me.
It's got to be born out of necessity, I found, is that the most of the stuff that I've done is been born out of the fact that I would have a task that's repetitive, or every week I'd have to go and find the same document from the same location. And it's like, sometimes you do a process where it's like, I've got to take that document, I've got to download it, rename it, delete the old data, and then I've got my blank template. And it's like, even if you've got a template somewhere, you still have to do the manual process of downloading that and calling it whatever, Monday the 1st, and then re-uploading it to wherever it is or sending it to the person. So when you do that a couple of times, you're like, hang on, there's got to be a quick way to do this. So my PA, Danbot, will email me the same document every week in a blank format with a dynamic variable that says it's today's date. So all I have to do is open the document and do the actual work. So
a dynamic variable, fantastic. You lost me there. So this week we're going to have a reflecting week. So we're not going to jump into a particular topic. We're going to have another week where we reflect. This week is all about lockdown learning. So what we have learned from the last 12 months, where we're recording this at the end of March 2021, and so it's this week marks the year anniversary of everything that's happened in the world in the last year or so, where we've had 3 lockdowns, we've had quite a serious global pandemic, and it has affected so many people's work and personal lives. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to reflect on that. And so it's fair to say that our lives have changed quite significantly, and I'm sure we're not alone. But I wanted to discuss how it may have impacted our productivity. So, I thought it might be interesting to talk about kind of 3 core areas. So, how did we feel when the initial lockdown was announced? So, what were those initial sort of reactions, and what things did we start to do in those first couple of months? And now looking back 12 months later, what have we learned from the last year? What have we learnt about ourselves and about our working life? And also how we think the world will adjust now things are hopefully stabilizing. When this episode goes out, hopefully we'll actually be in a new normal, proper new normal type position where we can go out and see each other and all of that good stuff. And what lockdown learnings are we going to take forward that we implemented in the last 12 months that actually would benefit us, regardless? So, Dan, why don't you start with how you felt when the initial lockdown was announced, and what were those first few things that you decided, okay, these are the changes that I need to make, and then we can go from there. Sound good?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, honestly, I'd been like a home worker for a while and had settled into this way of life. So I wasn't fearful necessarily of the virus itself, as I'm pretty confident in my ability to sit at home and avoid people, which is all people were asking us to do, right? And I'm good at that.
Well, people are also very good at avoiding you as well, for good reason.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. So at the start, the way that people, I guess, acted concerned me more than the virus itself, because, as I said, I'm confident that I can stay inside and wear a mask and, do all the good stuff to avoid catching it. I know that's not always the case, but yeah, I was genuinely concerned, for example, with the people that were like hoarding toilet paper and water. I was shooketh to the core. I didn't really know how to react to that kind of behavior, because, the shop across the road from me was ransacked. There was no toilet paper, and I'm thinking, you kind of go into that same cycle, because when you're in there and you're like, well, I haven't been able to get toilet paper for a week, so now there's toilet paper. Should I buy 2 instead of 1? It's like,
yeah, you become part of the problem, and
exactly,
it's easy to do that. I mean, I remember when one of the kind of core staples like rice, pasta, tins of chopped tomatoes, which is the basis of any sauce like passata type stuff, none of those were available. And I remember getting friend of the show David Bogner to go to the local, Polish shop, which is a legitimate shop in the UK.
Yeah.
They have all of the Polish sort of delicacies and all of that sort of stuff, and there's loads of local produce that they bring in. I actually sent him on an expedition to obtain pasta and chopped tomatoes, and we then met in a back alley near his house, and he put the bag of goodies, of contraband, on the floor, stood away, and then I went and picked the bag of contraband up and put him in my car. And then it was a clandestine operation, but one that kept us in pasta for weeks to come. So there we go. I forgot that even happened.
No, it's crazy,
but I'm
isn't
glad
it?
that you reminded me of that, because that's hilarious. Because it doesn't happen now.
Well, that's the thing. It kind of all settled down, but at the start, I was fearful, because I thought, do you know what? At some point, it could turn violent. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen, because people are going to they're going to start fighting over toilet roll, and there's shops across the road from me. I'm going to go in to pick up a loaf of bread, and somebody's just going to wallop me for it.
Sorry, it's just the word wallop just speaks to me on so many levels. I enjoyed
there was
that.
some feedback about our swearing, so I've had to tone it down a bit.
We basically sound like a couple of Victorian men. Just going, I'm going to give him such a wallop.
Kapow. Pow right in the kisser.
Flipping heck.
With regards to lockdown, I'll be honest, it was made a bit easier for me by the company I work for, because they were extremely transparent with regards to how they were dealing with the situation, considering it was new to all of us. We were just following the government guidelines, but we have regular catch-ups, and they were saying, like, this is kind of what's going to happen, and we're all going to be at home at some point, and do your best, which made it really easy. I think maybe when we're talking about this, it's worth splitting these lockdowns into kind of different chapters, because there was the first lockdown, which was, well, there was different types, wasn't it? There was lockdowns where you were stuck at home and you could do nothing. You could go just to the shops and come back. There was lockdowns where you could see small groups. There were lockdowns where you could exercise in a group. Then there was, you can create a support bubble. So it was a bit confusing for people as well. So there's different types of lockdown. And I think this chapter 3, for example, let's call it, which is the most recent, has been the hardest. So
yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, there was a really nice balance that I'll kind of expand upon later on. But the nice balance was over the summer, where for a lot of us, we could go and do generally the things that we liked to do whilst maintaining social distancing and all of that kind of stuff. And it was a really nice balance, because we were still working from home, and all of the benefits of working from home we were still realising and benefiting from. Mm-hmm. However, we could then go and see our friends and see our family and, conduct a life outside of that. And I think the initial sort of lockdown wasn't as tough as the last one for a multitude of reasons. I'll kind of expand on that when I talk a little bit about my experience. Did you go through a period of acceptance at some point where, because this is how I felt, there was an initial period of like, oh gosh, this will only be a couple of weeks sort of thing, and then you just sort of went, okay, the world is happening around me, and I will just be like water, to quote Bruce Lee.
And Bruce Lee, yeah.
Yeah, be like water. Fill the cup in the water, yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. I know the quote. I love Bruce Lee. I love that. Is that Enter the Dragon? Or is it just a quote?
No, it was in an interview. It was in an interview he'd had where he basically said, I can't remember the quote, but yeah, he basically said, be like water, let the world be adaptable, assimilate your environment, right?
Yeah, I did genuinely go through an acceptance quite early on, because I was saying, like, I don't want to make this political, but the way that the government had dealt with things historically.
Political.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I kind of assumed that it was going to take a long time. And when the first lockdown had happened, I estimated that we'd be kind of doing ebbs and flows for the next 2 years. And here we are a year later, but maybe it's not going to be another year from this point. But that's kind of how I saw it, because it's, it's a global pandemic. And at the start, they were just kind of saying, yeah, make sure you stay at home. But if you have pre-existing health conditions, you can... You don't have to wear a mask, but then they didn't really specify what pre-existing conditions were. all this sort of stuff. It was a bit weird. So I went for a feeling of acceptance, and then I was kind of excited to try and adjust my routine and lifestyle to having, like, Kerry was around in the day. As previously we'd had to alternate getting up early and or doing like late night walks to accommodate Sweet River, my dog. And, you know, it was nice to have some company that wasn't just virtual, because obviously when you're working at home, you've got a load of virtual meetings and stuff like that. And I guess that was part of the reason why the lockdown overall hasn't been too tough mentally for me. I feel for people who are stuck on their own and unable to see people at all. Like, I remember in the first lockdown, friend of the show was stuck in basically his basement without the opportunity to be able to see people. And we made an effort to play games and to socialize and stuff. But,
yeah,
you know, at the first lockdown, I just felt incredibly bad for him.
It has been a lot tougher on people who have lived on their own. You know, as you say, friend of the show, David Bogner, after a while, he was like, I haven't seen anybody in months. You know, when we were able to socialize, we all made an effort to do that because we didn't know, you know, how long that would last for. And then there was a period of time where we all thought things are starting to get back to normal now. You know, for example, I decided to wear my hair slightly longer than normal. Last time I got it cut, I was like, just trim the edges. Yeah, just trim the edges. I'm going to go long, but, you know, if I don't like it, I can always get it cut in 2 months. And that was almost 5 months ago. I just have long hair now. It's just, do you know what I mean? It's
part of your identity, yeah.
I'm looking very Hillary Clinton, to quote my other half. That's true love, isn't it? When your other half feels like they know that you're going to continue loving them regardless of what you say. And so they will say to you, you look like Hillary Clinton. Confidence is just through the roof, right?
Just stuck.
I suppose from me, you know, I had a bit of a similar adjustment period. Initially, I remember there being quite a bit of uncertainty at my work. Not because we were unsuccessful or anything like that, but there was, as with any organisation, it's, well, how is this going to impact us? How is this going to impact our ability to continue executing? And so I was thinking, what is this going to affect my job? Like, what's the situation here? And I think, you know, one thing that the company I work for did really well was just change and transform the cadence at which we then started working. So we used to operate in sort of months and quarters in terms of, you know, reporting and, you know, tracking progress, etc. And that went from months and quarters to days and weeks. And that initial process was really intense, right? So it was, you know, going from doing 1 or 2 things in a day, or 2 or 3 things in a day, or 3 or 4 things in a day, to doing like 10 or 11 things in a day. And so, you know, being in the sales team, there's quite a lot of pressure on us to continue executing despite all of the uncertainty, because we still have to, you know, meet our objectives. And, you know, I put a lot of personal pressure on myself because, you know, us doing business and making sales and executing pays people's wages.
Yeah, I always forget the opposite side of that is in the sense that I work reactively to a lot of the stuff that comes in. I obviously do proactive tasks as well, but yours is purely proactive. And if people aren't willing to talk because of COVID and stuff like that, you know, it's almost like a blocker. That must be difficult.
So it is purely proactive. It is, you know, especially at that point in time, it was so proactive. The amount of inbound sort of inquiries just dried up completely. And I only work with existing customers, so, you know, actually that was quite fortunate because I had a lot of existing relationships that that I've nurtured over many years. So we could be creative in terms of, you know, how we could help the customer continue to execute on those deliverables, whilst also sort of making the economics work in terms of the structure of them. Yeah, that was quite interesting actually, and quite cool. And actually, some of the things I really get value out of in my job is the creative side of it, and so that was quite fun. One thing that struck me this morning when I was kind of putting together my notes for today and thinking deeply about this was how the situation reminded me of what I read in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. You know, the main kind of thrust of that book is one can overcome the most difficult of challenges if he can find meaning in them. And I think we all found meaning in the first lockdown.
Yeah.
Everyone clubbed together and there was a real sense of camaraderie because there was meaning in what we were doing. Yeah, we were having to give up and we were having to compromise, but we were protecting each other. We were protecting our family and our loved ones, and we were trying to stop the spread of this virus. an output of that was, we needed to find ways to occupy our time and keep ourselves sane during this period of solitude, I guess you could call it. I just wanted to share a couple of those things before we jump down into kind of, what lockdown has kind of taught us, I suppose. Some of these things we did together, Dan. The first thing that I think we started doing was exercising, and that started with walking, and then transitioned
Let's
into.
stop it there. I don't want to talk about your damn exercise. I don't want to talk about your damn 5k speed. I know where you're going with this, and I don't want it to be public knowledge.
We're going there, Dan. So you buckle up. We are.
Oh man!
During the first couple of months, we ran kind of virtually together, I guess. We were encouraging each other and pushing each other to.
I've done 100k. Remember, that is actually true. That's not me, gloating. That's
You did 100k in a month. I think
I was
it was
desperate to stay active. So
I think for me, my logic was if I can run a 5k without stopping, I probably don't have the big bad C word, right? Yeah. Because it affects the respiratory system, and so if I can run 5 kilometers without stopping, then safe to say I'm probably okay. That was my logic, my internal logic. I don't know whether it was anything based on any kind of truth. It's almost a wives' tale, but that was my kind of internal way that I kept sane. It was like a little litmus test every time, and it became less about that and became more about pushing myself to get faster and faster and faster, and finding different music, different artists and stuff like that, and different bands to push myself harder. I found that actually, the band that made me run the fastest was a band called Counterparts, and if you like metal, go check them out. And if you like running, go check them out. It might not be your cup of tea, but it made me run a 5k in 24 minutes, which is my personal best so far, which is pretty fast.
Yeah, mine was 25, 30 or something like that.
Something like that. Something slower than me, but
yeah, I know.
I wasn't going to say it, but you said it.
I'm just saying it because that's what this is all boiling down to. You've set up this whole podcast so you can shame me on it and how you beat me.
Oh, we're only 12 episodes in, and you've already found out. I mean, maybe some could consider that that's not a lot of time.
No.
Some also could consider that is quite a long time for you to now realise that this is just publicly me shaming you about how
you beat me in a virtual race. You could
how
have
I beat
cheated.
you at many things, Dan.
Yeah,
many things.
That is true.
I'm joking.
No, it's fine.
It's fine. One of the things that also happened as a happy coincidence to that is I lost like 2.5 stone, which, those who knew me before may not have thought that I needed it, but my lifestyle was very unhealthy, and now it's not so much, and I'm a lot leaner now, which is good, and I feel a lot better in myself as a result of that. I just need to get my strength back up now, given that lockdown 3 has been quite a sedentary lockdown. But one of the key things that I got in terms of learnings was I felt mentally agile. I felt like I was kind of clear. I had clarity. And this was all around the time where, I was firing on all cylinders at work and things were just going really well. And it was like, it was all of these things kind of building up together, but exercising was quite key to that mental clarity. And, something that I implore anybody to give a try. The second thing was how, as I started adjusting to the new way of working, I started to realize, how much more I could get done with every day. Before times, I would do 2 or 3 things in a day, as I've said before, because I'd be traveling so much. But now I can do like 10, 11 things, 12, 13 things in a day. And that's been really interesting. But what's more is I can actually have a life as well. That's kind of the paradigm shift for me, is that I can get 3 times the amount of work done in a day and then down my tools at slightly early so I can go bouldering with my friends, 3 times a week, which is something that we started over the summer. And I love that. And I really enjoyed it, and it made me stronger, and it was just better for my problem solving, kind of mental agility and all of that good stuff. I would never have been able to start that in the before times because my schedule was just too erratic, and sometimes I wouldn't get home until really late, so it wouldn't be something I could be consistent with. It's the best of both worlds from my point of view anyway, and that's just my own personal experience.
Yeah. So for people that don't understand what bouldering is, because I get that maybe some people don't know what it is, it's like it's basically climbing but at low heights. So instead of going up like a, 10, 15 foot wall or whatever.
Well, there probably are about 10 foot, 15 foot, Yeah, but you don't use any of the rope stuff.
Yeah, they just put harder climbs on it, like harder grip holds, like you get on a normal climbing wall, and they go up in different difficulties.
But it's really fun. If you like that kind of thing, if you're struggling to find something that helps you build strength, because lifting weights is kind of boring, then bouldering is quite a good alternative.
It's really good for your mental stability as well, because when you're on the wall, that's all you're thinking about. You're not concerned about anything else. You're literally holding on for dear life. So any sort of worries you have can just wait whilst you're hanging on with one arm thinking, this is it. I'm done.
I'm about to die. Yeah, exactly. I'm about to Hans Gruber it off of this wall.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing I can do about it.
I've seen that in person. I saw your glasses fly directly off your face, and I cherish it every damn day.
I've experienced that firsthand, and it does feel like slow motion Hans Gruber. I'm falling to my demise, and you're not scared at the time though. You have this period of just everything makes sense, and then you hit the ground.
And your glasses fly off.
And the glasses fly off and just skid along.
I've not laughed that hard in a long time. When I still have that memory. Like I can visually see it when I think back to that, and I'm sorry, but it was hilarious. And you've got everyone else saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I just could not contain myself. I did check you're okay before I started laughing, but once I knew nothing was broken,
Well, with friends like this, who needs enemies? One of the things that I did have to adjust was changing my working practices, to kind of get in sync with the new world. And I'll kind of come on to that in terms of the learnings and things that really kind of, made me need to make changes. But I also had to change a lot about how I look after myself as well. I basically went from not looking after myself to looking after myself. And so, that's something that actually I've been able to have the time and the headspace to do that. And I'm very grateful for that, but let's jump into what lockdown has kind of taught us then. So, Dan, I've been talking for a long time, so why don't you take it away and go through some of your bits and pieces in terms of what your lockdown learnings are.
Yeah, no, so I've been quiet because a lot of the stuff that you're discussing I can really resonate with, and they kind of fit into what I've learned really, as opposed to how I felt.
Yeah,
I mean, like, let's be honest, when the pandemic started, like, comfort eating was another pandemic. It was takeaway central. So that as well. As soon as you got at home and you've got your partner there, it's a very simple question. Do you fancy takeaway? And normally when you're on your own, you kind of have to text, or you have to make that step to text your partner and say, right, should we get takeaway tonight? What do you want? Whereas when you're at home, you just go, should we get takeaway? And it's just a resounding yes.
I think it's worse now though, because I remember the first lockdown, none of the takeaways were open. So at least for a portion of it. So I was cooking a lot at home, which was really nice. And then obviously things started to open up, and we went into the tiers and things like that, and it was a bit more normal. But then obviously in lockdown three, return of the lockdown, the takeaways are now open. So for me, actually, it's been worse in lockdown 3 than in lockdown 1. I probably get takeaway once a week at least, because it's just, I don't know, it's just a nice treat,
comforting,
isn't it? You can't do anything else, so why don't you just have a kebab, or a pizza, or a curry, or a Thai,
it sounds like someone's hungry. You're off next week, so that's 5 takeaways for Monday to Friday. Don't worry about that. You're on your holiday.
Job done. Dinner's sorted.
So I'm going to start with, I've put a lot of small bullet points that I'll elaborate on, because realistically, lockdown has taught me so much, but mainly all of these are centered around who I am as a person, which sounds, quite deep, but I've had a lot more time to reflect and kind of not just get into that cycle. Like, I know I said I've been at home for a while, but I used to have quite an active social life. I used to go bouldering. I used to see people almost every other day, or at least have phone calls and stuff like that. And that kind of just slowed down a bit. And I had a time to really reflect inwards and kind of work out who I wanted to be as a person and what my goals were. And I looked at this as an opportunity for, like setting up the audio side, like something I'd said for so long that I wanted to do. And finally, I kind of had no excuses. So that's what kind of lockdown gave me. I'll go through my list so you can kind of hear what I've put together. So
okay.
I've learned mostly that negativity is reflected. So if you walk around with a negative attitude and you talk to people only about the negatives, then they kind of see that as well. Right, you're giving me your negative stuff that you're talking about. You've had a bad day. I've also had a bad day. So that kind of reflects round, and if someone calls you up and starts moaning about something, your first response isn't to be like, oh, thanks for telling me that. Let me tell you about all the good stuff that's going on. So I've taken a conscious effort to try and be more positive about how I approach people and how I talk to people.
That's good.
One of the big points that lockdowns taught me is to be more kind of fearless in decision making. Like we discussed this in, I think, episode 3 or 4, that, another decision can always be made. If you're stuck on a decision, just go with your gut. Try not to mull over the negative things that can happen. A big word on the show that we kind of discovered just by doing the podcast is ruminating, and it's important to kind of break that cycle and just go out and actually do things. Lockdowns also taught me to not put so much pressure on myself. Since I've been at home, like I realized that, even though I'm at home on my own, I'm still feeling the pressure. And that doesn't make any sense. Like at least if you're in an office and you've got people coming over to you and asking you questions and asking you for favors and, asking you for updates and stuff like that, you can understand where you're like, oh, I feel so pressured. But I've been at home and I know people are messaging me, but you can always just walk away from it and take a break. In some ways it was comforting as well to know that people were in the same situation with you being stuck at home, because a lot of my friends were office workers and they just kind of assumed that working from home was easy. You just kind of get into that kind of, oh yeah, well, it's easy for you. You don't have to go into the office. You work from home. You can get up at 8:59 and still be ready for work. And it's like, maybe I could, but I don't, because that's not how, the modern world works.
I think the level of discipline that you have to instill in yourself to remain effective whilst working from home is so much higher than if you have a routine where you leave the place you don't do work and go to the place you do work. It's that context switching in the real world that makes it much easier for people to do that in a disciplined way. However, when you work from home, it's a lot more challenging to do that. And a lot of the things that we've talked about over the last kind of few weeks has been around how we manage that in this environment. And, from my experience, working from home used to be work from home, but I'm at like 50, 60, maybe 65, 70%, effectiveness, right? But obviously that's not the case anymore. It's, I'm now 150% effectiveness based on where I were in the before times.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a different feeling, isn't it now? Working from home used to feel like, oh yeah,
it's a lazy time, isn't it? People that work from home can wear their shirt up top and no pants, whatever. That's what the kind of joke is.
Yeah, but it's just not like that anymore, I don't think. And in a good way.
No. Well, that's the thing. It's changed massively. The whole landscape's changed, and we'll come on to it in a bit in terms of how we think it's going to go. But it's just interesting to see that kind of shift when you realise that all of your friends are at home. You could just like kind of send a text around and be like, yeah, what are you guys up to? It's like, oh, just at home, chilling. And there was that big feeling of solidarity, which kind of taught me to appreciate a bit more as well. So next on my list is that, maybe this isn't just specific to lockdown, but it's something I've thought about a lot, which is giving someone your time. I think like it's the most valuable thing you can give. And like if you offer your time to someone, actually, lean into it and live in that moment, because you never know when another pandemic might come along and you're not going to see that person for, like at the moment, there's people I haven't seen for like a year, like at all. I haven't seen for a year. I speak to them, but it's not the same. Like I haven't seen my family really.
I've not seen my dad since, I don't know. Like, I don't think I saw him at Christmas. I think I might have seen him at Christmas 2020.
Yeah.
So I've not seen him in like 15 months.
Yeah.
Like face to face. Nor have I seen like any of my family actually for that long. We've not gone and been able to see anybody. So yeah, I totally get that.
So yeah, coming out of it, like it's, taught me to live in that moment. Like if we're hanging around with friends, I know we talked about it in the screen time episode, but just pop your phone on the side and try and actually connect with people a bit more, because I was very guilty of it. Like you just kind of, you're there and you're chatting to people and you're kind of all just waffling along, but maybe take that time to learn about your friends. Like ask a stupid question every now and then.
Listen more, talk less.
Exactly. My next point is kind of the opposite. I've said act more, discuss less. Basically define things that you want to do and get them done, because I've been guilty of this for many, many years, where I'd say like, I want to do something, but it's never been clearly defined. And lockdowns taught me to be like, when I've sat there, I actually want to kind of define who I want to be and why I want to be that way and write it down. Especially, having Notion is like, a central database for all of that stuff. And I can just look back and reflect. Like even keeping a journal has been like a huge change for me throughout lockdown. I like in my journal, I can now look back for a couple of weeks, see where I was emotionally, what I was actually doing. Like, I think I mentioned this before, like I've been on so many holidays, but I couldn't tell you where they were or associate many memories with them. I know the places kind of thing. And I would like to just have something to look back on. It's nice to have some tangible evidence where you can look back at the end of the lockdown and say, right, this is where I was at the start and this is where I am now. I've built like a whole framework around my working ethics and my personal like pillars that we discussed. I've defined, arguably throughout this lockdown, I've defined who I wanted to be as a person and who I want to project outwardly and how I want to progress and how I want to be a functioning member of society, which has been like, a huge thing for me. What about yourself? Have you learned a lot in lockdown?
Before I go into my bit, I'm delighted to hear that, you've used this opportunity to kind of really look inward and go, because it's so difficult to actually get the time to think deeply about who you want to be, because you just are who you are, right? But that's not always congruent with your value system.
Mm-hmm.
Your chimp brain will hijack you at every opportunity, and that might mean that your actions are at odds with your values. And so actually taking the time to understand what your values are to start with, and your pillars or whatever sort of vernacular you want to use, taking time to understand that first will then allow you to act more in line with those. Because I would be very surprised if people across the UK and the globe sat down and went, who am I and who do I want to be? Like, are those aligned? Like, am I the person that I actually think I want to be? Am I kind of aligned with my value system? Do my actions align with my value system? So I love, and I've spent a lot of time doing that this year as well, and like trying to figure out, okay, am I the best version of myself, or do I have stuff to work on? And so I'm so glad that that's something that you've seen as, not that I think that you ever needed it, but it's all about your inward reflection, right? And so yeah, that's awesome, and I love that, and I love that you're using Notion for it as well.
Yeah, I think it's something that everyone should do, and it doesn't have to be like my pillars that I kind of align to are very simple, and I'll share one of them with you, which is kind of like how we discussed about themes. It's not specific. It's not like do 5 good deeds every week or something like that.
Yeah.
One of my pillars is to be patient. That's it. So when I'm approached with an issue or somebody contacts me and asks for something, like, for example, like, I'm doing a lot of audio work. If somebody asks for a change, that sort of stuff, I just align with all of my other pillars, but with that main pillar and say, right, I want to be patient. So how would a patient person deal with this? How would I deal with this with patience?
Yeah.
And it kind of changes my view because, as people, it's very easy to just respond out of instinct and just be like, yep, I'm not doing that, or yeah, I'll do that, and kind of committing to that. But it's like, just be patient, try and understand what they're asking for, try and understand how this is going to impact you. I'm not saying think weeks and weeks ahead, but just think how much time it's going to take you, how much time you want to dedicate to it, and just think about it first. Does it align with who you want to be as a person? I know who I want to be as a producer. I know the kind of person I want to be. I know who I want to be as an engineer.
Yeah.
I know who I want to be as a friend. So when somebody approaches me with something like that, I don't want to be the person that tells someone to shut up, or I don't want to be the person that tells someone that their opinions, invalidated or anything like that. I want to be someone that can listen, which again, all boils down to one key pillar, which is to be patient and to be understanding kind of thing.
Yeah.
And writing those down just meant that I kind of have a guide that I can go to. Obviously, if you send me a message, I don't report back to that and go, right, Joe's messaged me, am I being patient? And tick them off each time. It's nothing like that, but it's nice to just have like a central system that you work towards.
It's the sort of thing you lean on when you're faced with a difficult problem, rather than it being something that, because if you lean into that kind of framework when you're faced with a challenging problem, it will become second nature to the easy problems.
For sure, yeah.
I think we should spend some time, if you're comfortable with doing that, speaking about values and about pillars, and maybe making that as part of a future episode. So you asked me about my learnings, and so I wanted to kind of split this into 2 areas, because when I talk about work and productivity, And then I kind of want to step out of Thrive Guy Joe and kind of talk a little bit about my personal kind of, learnings and all of that good stuff. So, I mean, primarily and fundamentally, I have learnt that I don't need to be effective and successful at what I do being in an office. I've had one of the best years of my career in this room that I sit in every day in an economic challenging environment. If we ever went back to normal, I know that my company are operating a digital first sort of principle now going forward, and that's going to be something that I really lean into, and I will always think twice before traveling to site and getting on a plane or getting on a train to visit a customer, because the way that we did things before, I now know, was so inefficient. Just in terms of sheer output, it was inefficient. There are some intangible benefits of it, but ultimately, if you were looking at the cold hard facts for what I do as a job, it wasn't the right way, and the new way is the right way, in my opinion. So that's something that I've learned and will be taking forward, as a core principle of how I do my job. The second point is the extra time that I now have, based on all of the things that I talked about earlier, has now allowed me to really think deeply about my processes. And, in the last 12 months, I've introduced Notion into my workflow, and now it is the backbone of my workflow, both personally and at work. And it's given me the opportunity to refine my craft. And so now I feel like I'm a much better, more effective business person, salesperson than I've ever been before. That holds a lot of intrinsic value to me, because one of my values is be a top performer, be the best. I always want to be the best. Everything for me is a competition. That's why I'm kind of aligned so much to the work that I do, right?
I like how our points are intertwined here, because what you've kind of just said there as well is also one of my points is don't settle for things just because they're the way they are. So be malleable, in the words of Bruce Lee, be like water. But in the lockdowns taught me to try and evolve processes. And it seems like you've done the same, like try and work out where you can save time and how you can better manage your methods and emotions as well. Like I tried that by creating, my own PA bot and creating template repositories for my common processes. And it sounds like you've done a similar thing. You've actually taken time to step away because you've been allowed to have that free time. Yeah. So you can step away and actually say, right, how could I do this better? Whereas if you're traveling all the time, you kind of just go and do your job and be like, well, that was a successful day. Let me come back, sit down and just crack on again. Yeah. There's been, a bucket load of negatives, but there is also the positives that have come out of this in terms of learning and growing.
Yeah, and the objective of today is to focus on the positives, right? We all know what the negatives are, and we're not going to be a negative podcast. It's not going to be a negative show. It's going to be positive all the way through. And so the last thing in terms of work is time blocking. One of the best time management elements to come out of the last 12 months for me has been time blocking. As I've said before on previous episodes, and actually I've kind of referred to it here in terms of the way that the working processes have needed to change to kind of accommodate the new sort of the new normal, quote unquote, is in my organization in particular, if you have any space in your calendar, someone is going to try and fill it. If you've got 15 minutes spare, someone's going to try and sneak a meeting invite in there. It's bananas, but that is the way that these things now seem to work. So getting all of the meaningful work done around all of your meetings and other things is even more challenging, because everyone is running by their diary, even when they weren't before, or even if they were before, they're now running by the diary. And so getting your tasks in your calendar in something that other people can see, even if it's just a 3-hour slot that says do your tasks, or I use the focus time functionality that's part of Office 365.
I was just about to say that I use that, and it's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, we've talked about it before, but it is really good because it automatically finds the time in your diary and it plums it in for you, which is great. One less thing for me to worry about. Using these tactics, either using the AI that ships with all of the enterprise software that most companies have got, or just doing it yourself. This will make sure that your day is your day. It's yours. And it's not hijacked by all of these other people trying to steal your time away from getting the really meaningful things done. I mean, that's just what I found in terms of my own personal kind of, feedback.
You've hit on a really cool point though there, is that with lockdown, it's applied a lot of meaning to the work that you do, because you're not just existing, you're actually having to focus, and you have to kind of report back to the business what you're doing. And the start of the lockdown, everybody wanted to be seen, not necessarily just on video, but everyone wanted to be kind of a bit louder and be like, I'm still working, I'm still being helpful and stuff like that, because we didn't know what was happening with furlough and what was happening with the industries. If I'm completely honest, we did not know how it was going to turn out. It could have just gone into even more of a downfall and, redundancies and stuff like that. So everyone's trying their best.
I think there's an expectation that now that more people are at home, they're more available than they were before because they've got more time. Oh, yeah, no, we're all at home. You're not traveling. You've got time for a 15-minute Teams meeting in between 2 other meetings, right? Yeah, you've got time. And it couldn't be any further from the truth. Yeah, I've never worked so hard in all my life, Dan. I genuinely have never worked so hard in all of my life. Mm-hmm. And so, hopefully this will be a paradigm shift for lots of other people, that they can benefit from this kind of more balanced world and this more balanced, work and life. So those are kind of my work points. But you're absolutely right. The way that that things have changed over the last 12 months in terms of people being more wanting to be seen, and now that kind of having settled down, the reality is that people are just so busy, just cracking on, because the cadence of work has now just completely just gone up 3 or 4 gears.
Yeah.
People are less worried about whether they're being sort of noticed or not, because it's just, you've just not got time to think about it. I don't think.
Exactly.
It's just my personal experience anyway. So I'm going to go into the personal stuff, but I'm a bit concerned that I've got a monologue coming. So I don't know whether you had any other work learnings that you wanted to share. I have some reflection that I want to share, and I want to give you some space as well. So
one of the biggest points I've learned from work is to carve out time for yourself. Like, as you've said, you actually explained it very eloquently, in the sense that you need to book out time for yourself. There's nothing wrong with booking out like a half-hour slot to just be like, this is my focus time. This is where I need to focus on my tasks, because it's quite quick to get your calendar booked up and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't really have many more that don't kind of blur the lines between personal and work, because they've been so intertwined over the last year. And we've already talked about the importance of disconnecting, but that has only really become a thing for me since the lockdown, because I've had to, for my own sanity, just switch off from work and be like, I'm not doing work anymore. I am home, Dan. Like, obviously if something's kicking off, I'll be available, as I've said in previous episodes, but sometimes you have to just shut off and be like, work is done and now it's time for personal time. I have here as well, in terms of, this is kind of work and personal, right? It's about celebrating your wins, like justifying your wins. Like, I know we do the win of the week segment, but we also created like our boost board within Thrive Guys, which is just where we put positive comments of people that have said like they found value in what we do, or people just saying, I've just listened to it whilst I'm hoovering and it made me hoover 15 times faster, whatever it is, whatever it is.
I haven't seen that one though. Maybe you're hiding that from me, Dan.
I just made it up. I didn't want to didn't want to name and shame people. But it's like, even just having that gives you a reminder of what you've done that's good in the world, and applying gratitude to every day. There's actually a quote I took based off the Daily is it Daily Stoicism?
Daily Stoic.
One of the quotes is, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. And that's like a big learning curve for me, is to wake up and just go, right, today's a new day.
Nice.
Every day. And I make a new journal entry and I say, what have I learned today? What am I going to do today? Instead of just being, it's easy to look and go, right, this week's going to be a pain, or this next month's going to be horrible because we've got so much to do. And it's like, well, just get up and do what you can do. And that was like a big mindset change for me. I was always kind of chasing what the next thing was. And I've just kind of learned since lockdown to kind of just lean into each day as it is and do what you can.
That's awesome.
I am fully prepped. I've got my water. I've got my popcorn. I'm ready for your monologue. Please reflect away.
I'm always just a little conscious that I spend a lot of time thinking now about things, and I want to share those thoughts, but I also want to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts as well, because I'm very conscious that sometimes I can be almost Shakespearean in my monologues. So,
no, you're good.
I've got two small things and one slightly big thing. One slightly fundamental thing, actually, and it's something that's very meta to the conversation that we're having right now. So you've already covered the blurring of lines between work and home.
Mm-hmm.
And, I resonate a lot with that. And it took a lot for me not to just spend every waking moment working. And so I've redressed the lines between work Joe, personal Joe. I mean, we talked about that on our episode around disconnecting in detail. So I'm not going to go into too much on that. If you want to get all the detail on that, you can pick up that episode and take a listen. We spent a whole hour talking about how we disconnect. The second thing was around checking in on myself more. One of the things I implemented over the last 12 months was the boot up and shutdown process, which I talked about in the habit tracking episode. Again, I'm not going to go into loads of detail there, but if you want to get that detail, you can go listen to episode 3, which is the habit tracking piece. And we spend an hour talking about that as well. These are the things, though, that have been struggles, but those have been things that I've really gotten value from getting right. All of the things that I've done have given me space and given me time to actually think about things, not just decisions at work and conversations that I've had 15 years ago. Actually slowing down and having time to think. Just think, right? My God, I genuinely feel like a lot of the time I'm not doing any deep thinking at all. I'm just evaluating and deciding constantly. And it's only over the last 12 months that I've actually had the space to sit down and think about things. And one of the things that I arrived at in terms of a eureka kind of moment made me start Thrive Guys with you.
Yeah.
And so let me just break that down because I want to explain it because I want this to be on record, basically. And this is the big thing, the meta thing. So I'm a creative person. I spent nearly 20 years in music endeavors and that sort of ebbed and flowed and now is sort of by the wayside now that I'm in the corporate world. And being a creative person who by and large wasn't getting their creative itch scratched in work was it was creating friction that I didn't really know that was there. I didn't I know there was something that I wasn't getting in terms of fulfillment, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it in terms of, okay, what is that? What am I not getting that I need? One of the things I love about sales is solving problems creatively. And, yes, there is a value exchange where, the customer is paying my company money and I'd be lying if I didn't benefit from that. But they are in return receiving value from our solution and service that in turn is making their professional and or personal life better. So that is fundamental and something that sometimes a lot of salespeople forget and customers forget for that matter too. But that there is a value exchange going on and I'm making their lives better by leveraging the technology that we can provide to help their organization grow and thrive and all of that good stuff. Love that. That plays right into my right into sort of what makes me tick in a big way. But what I wasn't getting is actually creating something that is a thing.
Yeah.
At the end of it, I'm being creative with the way that I'm approaching something, but there's not like a tangible thing that I can put my hands on and say that is a thing I've made. Thrive Guys is my thing, right? It's our thing, but it's what I mean is it's my widget that I've created. It's my reason for creation. Right? It's my creative outlet, essentially, that some might say is slightly atypical because it's a podcast about getting work done. And so, it's not what a lot of people would consider a standard piece of, creative work. It's no Bohemian Rhapsody, right? But it's me using what I know and what I'm passionate about at work and creating something that makes me smile, genuinely makes me smile, and I hope makes other people smile and helps them in meaningful ways. So even if nobody was interested, it's still very fulfilling to me. But because people are interested, and we talked about the boost board and how people are saying nice things about it, that's so much better as well. So what I would say is if you are a creative person and over the last 12 months, you've been in not so a creative job or you've not been in a creative endeavor in the last 12 months, if you have time, please start a creative side hustle. it's been one of the highlights of my year. Genuinely has been one of the highlights of my year.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want other people to feel as good as I do about it. I want to share that, and I want to have other creative people who have gone through a process in their teens and early 20s where they've done they've been in a band, or they've been an artist or something like that, and then they've left that for the corporate world, and they've felt sort of a little out of kilter. As I have. I'm still executing and still doing great at my job, and I'm still in that 100%. But this is the bit that kind of fulfills me in a different way, that, I think doing something like this and having a kind of a full complement of things that make you happy and things that make you fulfilled is so important. So, that was just my little monologue there in terms of what I've learnt personally over the last 12 months. And also, I discovered Notion, which is literally the best thing since sliced bread. Couldn't go an episode without at least
shouting them out,
doing the old Wayne's World, we're not worthy to Notion. So I want to wrap up today by talking about what learning will we be taking forward into the new world now things are back to normal. So Dan, I'd be keen to understand how you think the world will kind of adjust by going back to normal. Like, what will that kind of look like, and what life is going to be for you, or maybe how do you want life to be?
Kind of feels sad to say it, but I don't really want the world to change. I like this new way of working, this new way of living. I like being at home, and I like having Kerry around. I like knowing that my friends, for example, if we're all working till 5:30, most of my friends in the local area are going to be at home already. You're not waiting for people to finish up. You can go and see them. Obviously I miss the camaraderie in the office, being able to see people, and, just that feeling of solidarity when you are in an office with people. But, we've all survived without it for over a year. So if it is what it is, then it would be nice to see people acting with intent when they go to an office, for example. And I was actually saying this, like, I truly hope that many businesses adopt the working from home way of life. But I guess the difficulty is that some people need the office as part of their own productivity journey. Some people just are by and large not productive at home. It's not the way they're wired, and they haven't built a framework to support that. Like, their whole framework is built around getting up, physically going into the office and sitting at their desk, and that's when they get the best work done. Some people don't have happy home lives, so going into the office is a relief for them.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the new normal is going to be. I know where I'd like it to be, but that's, from a purely selfish standpoint, in terms of being able to see my friends. I'll be happy when bouldering opens up again, so I can have that part of my life back.
Definitely.
I don't know what the new normal is going to be. I just know that I kind of like the way of life at the moment because it's peaceful for me. I've had a lot of time to reflect, and in terms of things I'm going to take forward is continuing my journal. It's so important to just stop and kind of see where you're at and decide what's right for you, and actually listen to yourself, not necessarily listen to your body and be like, I'm hungry, whatever, but listen to how you're feeling at that point. Like, just keeping, it's not really a mood board, but I create like a rating every day on how I feel, and I can look back on that over a calendar for like a year. Once I've got all the data in there, I can look and go, right, you've largely been in a negative mood throughout, these months or whatever. Why is that? And you can only start making change once you start looking at that kind of stuff. And it's important to kind of reference that I'm not talking about like going full mindfulness. You don't necessarily have to sit and meditate for an hour a day and kind of, do yoga and listen to meditative music and all that sort of stuff. But just take time to just, switch off from your phone, take a walk, and just, I don't know, maybe sometimes be alone. Like, I actually take a morning walk on my own, but then I still take walks with Kerry and River throughout the day, like lunchtime and evening. But sometimes it's just nice to have that walk on my own to think about myself and what I want to achieve. If I can take one thing forwards, it's to really align with those pillars that I'd created for myself. It's going to be different for everyone, but once you know who you want to be, take that forwards and just run with it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it helps with your difficult decisions, but it also helps with your minor decisions and just working out how you want to present yourself to your friends and to your family and to anyone you might meet. As a guy who walks his dog around the area, and he's got so much knowledge about so many interesting different topics, and every time I speak to him, I think it's just he's always willing to share, and he's just such a nice person to speak to. And it's like, that's who, mainly who I want to present myself as. I don't want people to walk away and think that guy's annoying. Like,
I was about to ask you, that sounds like the sort of person that you would kind of align as aspirational to yourself. You'd be like, I'd love to be a person like that.
Well, I'm 29 years old, but I've kind of just got to this point by just doing things, not really thinking about how that impacts anyone else. Like, just, I know there is a kind of lifestyle of living in the moment, but it's like, I have just kind of existed up until this point. And I know I used that as a quote. I think it was in last week's episode. I don't want to just exist. I want to kind of start living and start taking note and start appreciating. When I go for a walk, I want to appreciate the things that are around me. And lockdown's kind of been the catalyst for that, in terms of you've had to. Like, when I go for a walk in the morning, it's not just to listen to podcasts or listen to songs. It's to look around and just kind of absorb your surroundings as well, because you never know when you could be forced to sit between the same four walls again.
Very true.
And that's not a fear of mine, but you just never know. And it's like, when you do have that opportunity, go and visit new places and go and enjoy yourself.
It's been the simple things that I've missed the most. And, something that you said there really kind of kicked me in the stomach, where things are less about things. They're about, friends and family and connections and being present in those moments, because that is what we've been missing for the last 12 months. As I said earlier, I've not seen my dad for over a year, and that time is lost. Time only goes in one direction. So, I think one of the things that I'm going to take forward is just to be a bit more present in my family kind of ecosystem, because I've always been somewhat aloof, because I'm very independent.
He's probably busy, because he's working.
Yeah, exactly.
Big man out in London.
Big man out in the world.
Doesn't know how to put a fence up, but he does now.
Yeah, I think I said on an earlier episode that my dad's never been as proud as when he realised that I managed to put a garden fence up, without needing a real man to do it. Because let's be honest, Dan, like you're the same as me. Couple of office boys go, oh, how's this fence work?
It don't fit.
It don't fit. What's going on? So my final thought in terms of what learning I will take into the world and what I want the world to look like is very, very similar to sort of your sort of point of view. I think where I would expand on that, I suppose, would be, I think we need to find a balance between the way we are working now and the before times. I think that's fundamental to long-term successful change, and for actually us being able to retain some of what we have been benefiting from at the moment. So, as I said earlier, I'm totally bought into the digital first working mantra. And honestly, I don't see myself getting on a train or a plane anytime soon just to have a meeting for the sake of it, because there's no value in doing that. However, I do really miss sitting in a room with my colleagues and chewing through new ideas and creating some sort of campaign, or take a new product to market and then having a beer and a burger afterwards, or whatever. Having some time where we can then decompress, because the job is difficult. No one does a sales role for the health, and I hate Teams beers. Team sessions where we're like, let's have fun, where we're all just kind of looking at each other, but kind of just looking at ourselves as well. One person has to talk at once, and it's just naff.
Yeah.
I just don't. I know it's been needs must, right? But it's just not. It doesn't align with what I consider fun. And so, I think once we find that balance, I think we'll be onto an absolute winner.
It's going to be awesome. Like, if you look at the positives, right, it is going to be awesome, because when people go into the office, it will be with intent. Like, I think I put a note somewhere. I'm not going to scroll through my page here, but I put a note somewhere that it would be nice, for example, like you and I to plan to go into London on the same day.
Yes.
And it's like you can then go for food after work. It doesn't necessarily have to be with your colleagues, because you spend all day with your colleagues. But,
True.
Friend of the show will also be in the office. It's nice to be like, do you know what, let's break up the day and go into the office together and kind of make a day of it, instead of just popping in on a Monday for the sake of it. Like, if there's team meetings and stuff, or, team gatherings, I'll obviously attend, because it's like, the intent's there. But what I don't want to happen, for example, is to go like travel 2 hours into the office, sit down, and I look to my right and it's just me and my boss again. I say, all right. He says, yep, how you doing? And then that's it. Got some work to do? Yep. I don't mind the whole social aspects of it, but it's going to be really cool to see people being like, do you know what, I'm going in. Do you want to come in? So you have that, that person to bounce off and actually make an effort to go and see each other instead of just going in and seeing who's about. And
then going for some food afterwards, absolutely, I think is London is one of those places where there's everything, right? And we both live out in what would be considered the sticks, right? And so, going into London and I would be well up for that. I did see that you wrote that in the notes here and in the outline for the show today, and I was like, absolutely yes.
Yep.
I want to go. There's so many places that I listened to another podcast called the Off Menu Podcast with James Acaster and Ed Gamble, who does it as well, who is a comedian who loves metal, and so like he's like aligned with my principles, and I love it. I'm sure this is a really popular podcast, so everyone knows what this is, right? But what I like about it is when they talk about the different places that they've been in London, and I'm just sitting there writing them down, just going, oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh, dumpling place. Oh yeah, where's that? I'm going to go try that out when the world is back to normal. And so I've got a long list of all these places that I really want to go and try. So, I need a buddy. So, maybe me, you, and friend of the show, David Bogner can do that.
If it's not pepperoni pizza, you ain't interested.
So, have you got any final parting thoughts before we conclude today's episode?
Yeah, it's another quote. It's not mine, but it's something I've really resonated with over the last year, which is don't explain your philosophy, embody it.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been trying to do is, not just explain to people why I want to be better and how I want to be better, but just do it. Just live that and be better.
Lead by example.
Exactly. And it's something I've struggled with because, I say all this stuff, I'd love to be more positive, and then I find that I'm up in the morning stomping around going, oh, it's a Monday. It's like, and I just want to start, just want to start kind of living and feeling a bit more positive, and, that's what's kind of been born out of the lockdown for me. Is a profound sense of happiness and appreciation.
And that's Epictetus, isn't it, that quote?
If that's how you say his name, then yes.
Yeah, I think it is. I've never heard anyone say it out loud, but the Daily Stoic, I think you probably got that from, and that is a cracking book. So a friend of mine from work, a friend called Tom, friend of the show Tom, he recommended it to me. So shout out to Tom for that, because I think we've both gotten a lot of value out of it over the last kind of few months. So thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our show. And if you really, really liked it, please consider giving us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out, it helps us grow our audience. So, only if you loved it, but if you did, then that'd be really good. If you'd like to hear more from Dan or myself, please follow us on Twitter @ThriveGuysPod. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Say goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye.